Only a male slave, actually indentured servant, and not a female indentured servant. The Ida, so what is Rebbe Lazar? How does Rebbe Lazar learn no girls allowed? Miboile ad sheyomer kishahu evet. What does he learn with that? He learns that the declaration, I don't want to leave or I want to stay, must be made within the end of the term of the Eved. He can't serve out his 6 years and then a day later say, I want to hang around. He has to do it at the last days of his servitude. Okay, Ve'ida, how does he learn that? May Eved ha-Eved nafka. It says, it could have just said the slave. It says ha-Eved. So that shows that he still is a slave. Ve'idach Eved ha-Eved lo darish. And the back and forth, we do not have Rabbi Lazar making a drasha on the hay. Okay. So that took care of that back and forth. Now we're going to go into the next distinction between the two kinds of Eved Ivri in the Brisa. My time is the Tanakama. Why does the Tanakama the Omer Meicher Atzmo Ein Ma'anikin Lo? That when a person who sells himself into slavery, when his time frame is 6 years or Yovel, but his time frame is up, he does not get a bag of goodies when he leaves. Okay, but the Eved who was sold by Bezdin does. So why does the Tanakama make that distinction? Mamayet Rahman Gavi Mechuruhu Bezdin, because the terms of giving him the gifts when he leaves are stated in the parsha that talks about a Bezdin selling him when he can't pay his fine. So he limits it to that. You should definitely give him gifts. The him means one sold by Bezdin, lo velo l'meicheratzmo, but not one sold by himself. So what is Rebbe Lazar, where he says both get gifts? How does he deal with it? The Ida, hahuma boile lo velo liyarshav. He uses this lo. We had this 2 days ago. He uses this lo that when you sell yourself or Bezdin sells you into involuntary servitude in the case of Bezdin, or you indenture yourself in the case of the guy who does it on his own, that his service is only to the man who bought him. If the man who bought him dies, that person's heirs do not pick up his contract. Okay, Yarshavamilo. So why don't why should, or if he dies, the slave dies, his heirs do not pick up the gifts that were owed to their father. So why not? Okay, Sacher Kurai Rachmana, and what the man is called a hired worker in one pasuk. We did Sacher. Ma Sacher Pu'ulasa Lirusha. If if you're a contractual worker and you're getting paid $20 a day and you work for 10 days, so your boss owes you $200. If you then have a heart attack and die, your heirs can come and collect the $200 from your boss. So why can't this slave's children come and collect the gifts? Right? So too, these gifts are part of the contractual arrangement. So why can't his kids come and pick up the gifts? Ella, so that the Gemara doesn't agree with that. That agrees that it's not fair that they don't get it. And they said Rav Elazar learned something else from the lo. Ella lo velo labal. That bal choiva. So that means that, like this: if I'm a poor person and I've accumulated a pile of debts, I owe Ruvain money and I owe Zev money, and I sell myself to this gentleman. So perhaps you might argue, we have a halacha: if A owes B and B owes C, C can come and collect from A, right? So if I owe Ruvain and this gentleman owes me gifts, why can't Ruvain come and get the gifts from that guy? Why can't we apply the ABC principle? So Rav Elazar learns lo v'lo lebal chov. The gifts only go directly to the newly freed indentured servant, and he can't pay them to his creditors. Okay. Mid svara lan ba'alma de Rabbi Nosa, because we normally accept Rabbi Nassan's ABC principle, the Tanya, because the normal rule is minayin shenaisa b'chaveru mana. If I Ruvain owes Shimon a mana, v'chaveru b'chaveru, and Shimon owns Yitzchak that mana. Minayin shemotzin misev and Aislin lazeh. We could take from Reuven and give it directly to Shimon, and cut. I don't know. I screwed up the names, but we cut the middle guy out. Talmud Lomar v'nosan la asher asham lo. You give it to the one, literally, that you have guilt towards, meaning that you have not paid your debt. Okay. Asalo la afuke. So here we use the word lo to say this is an exception to Rav Nassan's ABC rule. Okay, the Ida. What is the what do we do with the other viewpoint on this, Brisa? That Baalma nami lo spira lan kerebi Nassan. He rejects the Rav Nassan principle altogether, so it's not an issue. Okay. My time at the Tanakama, the Omer Meicher Atzmo Ein Rabo Meiser Lo Shichva Kananis. We had a machlaikas. Reb Nassan says that a person sold by Bezdin, his master, to for his own self-interest to increase his holdings, can make the slave take a Canaanis woman into bed with him, and the Eved Canaanis produces children they're owned by the master. But the Tanakama says that a guy who sells himself does not get a bedmate. Okay, and yet, his Baal Plukta says both do. Okay, so my time at the Tanakama the Omer Meicher Atzmo Ein Rabo Meiser Lo Shichva Kanainis, that the guy who sells himself does not get the Canaanite bedmate. Mamayet Rachmana Gavi Mechuruhu Bezdin, the pasuk of giving him the Canaanite woman is in the parsha of being sold by Bezdin. The pasuk says, "Im adayna of yitain lo isha." If he gives, again the word lo, if he gives him the Canaanite woman, so that is limited according to the Tanakama by the lo to the one who's sold by Bezdin. The Idach, what does Rav Elazar say of the lo v'lo l'mocharatzmo, to him, and not to a guy who sells himself? Okay, the Idach, what does Rav Elazar do with that? Lo bal karcho. He uses the lo to say the indentured Jewish servant has no brera. The master wants to give him a slave girl to sleep with. He must meet to his duty, so to speak, and sleep with her to produce offspring for the master. And that's what he does with the low. Give it to him, whether he likes it or not. Mishnah Socher Socher Nafka. What is he? How does he get that? He gets that from the Hekesh of Socher Socher. Socher means someone who's hired to work. Okay, and there's another pasuk, Tisanya. There's a pasuk when you let him go. You're not when if you purchased or received a slave from the court and you let him go, you're not supposed to feel regret that he's leaving because the pasuk says, "Ki Mishnah Sacher Sacher Avdecha." He worked for you for 6 years, and he worked twice as hard as he would as a plain old hired hand would work. Okay, Sacher Eina Ovid Elabiyoim. And the drasha we do on this pasuk is that a hired hand only works during daytime hours. Eved Ivri, Eved Ben Beyomu Ben Belayla. But the Jewish indentured servant works both day and night. V'chi sala adaita she'aved avdei Eved Ben Beyomu Ben Belayla. If you think that you're going to put this indentured servant to work on a 24-hour schedule, he doesn't get any sleep time. That's ridiculous. For halok for nemer, we already said kitov lo imoch, that you've treated him well. You can't overwork him. So what does it mean that he works twice as hard? You have to give him decent meals. You have to give him good things to drink. So Rabbi Yitzchak explains this double effort pasuk. Mikan sherabu moser lo shifcha kanainis, that his day job is to pick in the field, and his night job is to produce slaves for his master, and that's the double effort that he puts in. The Idach, so what is Rebbe Lazar, who says that both a self-indentured and a court-ordered indentureship have to get the bed made, the Idach. He says, if you learn it from the twice as hard, Hava Amina Hare Mile Medaite. That would apply only when the Jewish slave agrees to take on the female as a bedmaid. Aval Balkorcha Emalo, but if he refuses, if he doesn't want her, then maybe he doesn't have to do it. So therefore, Kamash Malan, that he uses that pasuk to prove that the indentured servant has no brera. He has to service the slave girl so she can make babies for her master. Okay. What? I can't hear you. One of my hearing aids is broken. You got to go louder.
You're talking about Rav Yomi.
Yeah.
Have we heard of him before?
Yes, he's the one who we've had him for 3 dapin already. He's the fellow who is bringing all these prices and asked the question, who is the Tana that does not hold the Gezerah Shava? In order, they're differently mudim, okay? A Gezerah Shava is is where they have a word here and a word here, and you say that they bring meaning to each other. In order to bring a Gezerah Shava, you have to have learned it from your Rebbe. So it's theoretically possible that some Tana never learned this Gezerah Shava, and if he wants to darshan these psukim, he has to use another technique. So he brought the question, who's the Tana? And then he said it's the Tana of this brisa. We went through one brisa. Then we rejected that, and we said that Gezei Reshava works. The only thing is there are psukim that limit it. So he said, okay, let's try another brisa, and we're now, I think, on the second brisa. So that's every time when we get a new brisa, this is still his presentation.
Have we,
It's been going on for us for a few
have
days.
we met this Rav Tavyomi before? Never heard.
It's the same Rav Tavyomi who raised the issue in the first place of who's the Tana that does not have the Gezei Reshava. Okay, and we rejected his first brisa. We're in the middle, I think, of the second brisa, and we're working on rejecting that as the brisa that proves somebody doesn't have the Gezei Reshava. And then we'll go on to a third in a minute.
We're rejecting what Rav Tavyomi.
No. He holds for sure that there's a Tana out there who does not know from the Gezei Reshava. Okay? And he's bringing the Gemara is bringing discussions. Well, because Rav Elazar and the Tanakama of this brisa do not agree, maybe it's the Tanakama of this brisa who rejects the Gezei Reshava. And then we're saying no, he does buy the Gezei Reshava, but he says various psukim limit, and that's why you can have a difference. So we rejected that. We had two ideas. Now we have a third, right? We had the idea you can't pierce your ear. We had the idea you can't. Now we have the idea that according to the Tanakama, an indentured servant who sells himself does not get a bedmate, and the indentured servant sold by the court does get a bedmate. So then he said that the only reason the indentured servant who sells himself does not get a bedmate is because the pasuk has a low in it. The pasuk that gives the indentured servant the bedmate when he's sold by the court is limited to only court sold. So then the Gemara just asked, well, what does Rav Elazar do with that pasuk? And Rav Elazar uses the pasuk to say he doesn't have a choice. He's got to take the bedmate whether he likes it or not.
So I'm still saying.
It's the same Rav Hamnuna.
So has Rav Tavyomi?
Rav Tavyumi, I'm sorry.
Has he brought something new into this?
No, he's the one who's doing the talking. This is his shear. He's giving this shear and he's bringing these possibilities and then bringing objections to them. He's giving a shear that for us has been for 3 days now. But for him, it was probably a 45-minute shear. Okay? So, Ella Montana Delo Yalif Sacher Sacher. So, who is? This is still Rav Tamnuni talking. Who is the Tana who rejects the Gezei Reshava of Sacher Sacher, connecting the two kinds of slaves? Hi, Tana who? It's the Tana of the following brisa. The Sanya, this is now the third brisa that he's bringing. The Sanya Veshav al Mishpachtoi, etc. At the end of his term of indentureship, he goes home to his family. Omer Rav Elazar ben Yaakov, he says, which kind of Jewish servant is this pasuk talking about? If we're talking about a guy who sold himself, we already told you about him. Okay, if we're talking about a guy who had his ear pierced, we already talked about him. Hi, ain't hakasv midaber, so the pasuk can't be talking about anybody Ella b'machora bezdin shtayim v'sholosh shanim lifnei Yovel. The pasuk has to be. We rejected all the other theoretical possibilities because there were pasukim that covered them. So what we're talking about here, what does it mean the guy gets to leave and go home? It can't mean at the end of 6 years. We said that already. So what it has to mean is if this crook was smart enough to do his thievery only a year or two before Yovel. So instead of getting a 6-year sentence, he only gets a 2 or a 3-year sentence because Yovel terminates his sentence. So when the pasuk says he gets to go home to his family, it means even though his sentence isn't up, if Yovel intervenes. Okay, Harik Far Amor, we read. So now the Gemara, okay, so that's what it has to be talking about. Shahayovo Motzio, that when Yovel happens, he gets to go home, according to that pasuk. So Rav, now, based on that limud, you got to hold cup here. We're going to try and argue that Rav Elazar ben Yaakov is the Tana who does not do the Gezerah Shav of Sacher Sacher. Okay? If you say that Rav Elazar ben Yaakov does hold from the Gezerah Shava, Lomali, then why does he need this pasuk? We've already said. We've already said that Yovel interrupts the sentence. And if you do the Gezerah Shava, it doesn't matter if you're an indentured servant because you sold yourself, or you're a servant sold by the court, you got to go free at the end of Yovel. So the implication would be that he does not accept the Gezerah Shava, so he had to find a pasuk that applies to the sentenced slave, that he does go free anyway when Yovel comes. So that was the effort for this brisa to identify the unknown time. So the problem with that is Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, he says Li Eilam Yalev Sachar. No, Rav Elazar ben Yaakov does accept the Gezerah Shava. The Itzrich, he says, you still need this third pasuk. Salka daita chamina, I might have said if we didn't have this pasuk, Meicher Atzmahu, the law of it, Isura, that the going home by Yovel only applies to a slave who voluntarily became a slave. He didn't do anything wrong. But this guy who did something wrong, Aval Mechuro Bezdin, the Avad Asura, this guy who did something, who violated the halacha and stole, and that's why he was sentenced to servitude. Ema Niknase. Maybe we continue his knas. We find him and he stays through Yovel till his 6 years is up. Kamash Malan, that would have been a logical thing to say. So Kamash Malan, we need the pasuk to say that's not so. He gets out of, quote, jail, even though it's only been, say, 2 years into his term. Okay, so with that, he's not the time. So we're going to take for 1 minute a little side excursion. Amar Mar Ibn Nirza, if you want to theoretically argue that the Gaham to his family pasuk is talking about a guy with the pierced ear, Harek Var Amar, we already told you that. Maihu, how do we know that a Nirza goes free on on the Yovel year. In other words, if you pierce your ear, it's not a forever deal. It's only until the next Yovel. How do we know that? The Sanya, we have a brisa. V'shavtem ish al achuzaso v'ish al mishpachatoi. The pasuk says you have a Yovel year, you make the Yovel year, and everybody who had sold property prior to the Yovel year, that property reverts to the family, and anybody who was incarcerated or sold himself goes home to his family. That's that pasuk. So what is that pasuk talking about? Do you want to make a distinction between the two kinds of Eved Ivri? If that pasuk is limited to a guy who only sells himself, Harek Amor, we already told you that. If you say it's only talking about a guy who was incarcerated because he stole and Besdin sells him to somebody for a 6-year sentence, Harek Varamar, we already talked about that too. Ha, ein a kasav medaber ela benirtza shtayim v'shalosh shanim lifnei yovel. So you wind up that you can only apply this pasuk to a guy whose sentence is shortened because Yovel intervenes. Okay, Shahav Yovel Motzio, because no matter what the case is, he was sentenced to 6 years, but Yovel intervened and he gets to go home. Okay, so now we're back to Bryce's. Okay, my mashma. So why do you think that based on that little side venture, that what we're talking about here, this Yovel comment, is to refer to the Nirtza, the pierced ear fellow. Omer Rabba Bar Shila, Omer Kra Ish. It says the man goes home. Ezaho davar shenoheg be'ish ve'ein noheg be'isha. What slave rule applies only to men and not to women? Have amar zur shiritzia. We already said women don't have the option of staying, but only men do. So it's logical to apply the pasuk to a nirtza because it uses the word ish. Okay. So now what about all these other psukim? Itzrich lemichtav mecharuhu bezdin. We needed a pasuk that says that the guy sold by the court gets to go free at Yovel. We showed that already. V'itzrich lemichtav nirtza, and we need another pasuk to say that the nirtza gets to go free at Yovel too. Di ashma inin mechuru bezdin. If you said only that someone sold by the court gets to go free, mishum delo zimne, because his sentence isn't fulfilled. It's canceled by Yovel. That's why we have to terminate. You need the pasuk to terminate his sentence. Avol nirtza the mataye zimne, but the guy who's a nirtza, according to both, the guy who's locked up by Besdin gets to opt to stay at the end of his sentence. So he's already filled his sentence. So why can he get to stay? Why Nick say? Why would you say we don't? Why would you theorize that he does not go free because we have to penalize?
He should go.
No, why would you say he doesn't go free because we're penalizing him? He was sentenced to 6 years and his 6 years is up. This is the nirtza.
Right.
So his 6 years is up and then he decides to stay for another decade or two. His term is up. Why would you have a havamina that because he did something bad years and years ago, we're going to penalize him now. That doesn't make sense. So that's why we need that pasuk. The ashma in the nirtza, if we only talked about the nirtza mishum sheish, we would say, as I just explained, because he filled his 6 years. Avo mecharuhu bezdin shelo sheish, but the guy whose sentence is terminated early by the appearance of Yovel, who did not serve his 6 years, Amalo, maybe he gets penalized and has to stay. Tzricha, so we need both psukim, and we need psukim to cover both the guy who's incarcerated and the guy who voluntarily goes into indentured servitude. Okay. Furthermore, the itzrich lemiktav Shavtem, we need the pasuk that says that the men go, everybody goes back home at Yovel. The itzrich lemiktav la'olam, and we also need a different pasuk that used the word la'olam for the pierced ear person. Okay, so la'olam means forever. Okay, so now we have two psukim that conflict. Ostensibly, one pasuk says if you pierce your ear, you stay forever, and the other pasuk says you go at Yovel. So if you pierce your ear, it could be 20 minutes later that Yovel comes, and the ear pierce has no real effect. So there's an apparent contradiction. Because of Rahman li'olam, if we only said li'olam, Hava amina li'olam mamish, it would mean until he dies, literally forever, for his entire lifetime. Kasav Rachmana v'shavtem, but the other pasuk says he gets to go home, which shows that li'olam means until the next yovel. The ikas of Rachmana v'shavtem, if we only had the v'shavtem pasuk, Hava amina hani mili, that we would say, as we tried to say earlier, that it only applies if he hasn't done his full 6-year term. But if he has done his whole 6-year term, he had the right to leave then. So maybe if he decides to stay, what he's saying is, I'm going to waive my Yovel rights. I'm going to stay forever. And we can't say that Yovel terminates his term because he's now there voluntarily. The argument would be that the end result of his opting to stay can't be stricter than the initial sentence he was given, which is a maximum of 6 years. So sheish, since his original sentence is a maximum of 6 years, nami sheish, maybe the pierced ear deal just doubles his time. He only gets another 6 years. Kamash malan la'olam, therefore it uses the word li'olam, which we now interpret to mean la'olamo shel yovel, the entire term until the next yovel, the entire term of years until the next yovel. Okay, so that we've just rejected the third brisa attempt to find somebody who does not do sachir. Okay, everybody got that? So we're going to try once more. Ella man tana de lo yeliv sachir, who is, out the bottom line, the tana that doesn't do the gezerah shava? Rebbe, it's Rebbe Yehuda Nasi. To Sanya, we have another brisa. Now here we have a third situation. Previously, we've talked about a bezdin selling a Jew for committing a crime. Then we talked about a poor Jew who sells himself to another Jew because he needs money. Now we're going to talk about a Jew who sells himself to a non-Jew because he needs money. And the halachas are a little different. Okay, so here we go. The imlo yigael ba'ele. The rule basically is if a Jew sells himself to a non-Jew, the non-Jew is going to make, the contract is going to have certain clauses. One of the clauses will be that the guy goes free on Yovel like any other indentured servant. Additional clauses will be that his relatives can buy his contract, and therefore he'll no longer be the slave to the goy. That's A. B, he himself can save up money and buy his contract. Or C, some charitable stranger could redeem him from the goy. Okay? So now we're going to go through what are the halachic implications of those three possibilities. His relatives, he himself, or a charitable stranger. And that's what we're going to deal with. And we're going to show in a brisa as a havamina that Rebbe, because of his statements in this brisa, obviously does not accept the Gezerah Shava of Sacher Sacher. Okay, that's where we're going now. Rebbe Omer, now there is the pasuk says Imlo Yigael Ba'ela, which translates, if he is not redeemed by these. So part of the issue is, who are the these that we're referring to? Are we referring to relatives, or are we referring to charitable strangers? All right? Rebbe Omer, Ba'ela hu nigo, on that when relatives pay the master the redemption price, he is redeemed. The ein nigel b'sheish, but he is not redeemed by the termination of the 6-year contract. Sheyachol halo dinhu, because if he could, if it were not like that, we would have the following kal v'chomer. Ma misha einu nigel ba'ele, a servant who cannot be redeemed by relatives, meaning a Jewish servant who sells himself to another Jew, or a court-sold slave, nigel b'sheish, but the 6-year rule applies and he ends his servitude at that point. Then nigel ba'ele, then a guy who can be bought out by his relatives. A nudin shenigel b'sheish. How much more so the 6 years should work? Okay, if the 6 years works where they can't cut him short by giving money, surely the 6 years should work where they can cut it short by giving them money. Okay, so Talmud Lomar ba'ele. So therefore, the pasuk has to put in, he can only be redeemed, according to Rebbe, by relatives. The ein nigel b'sheish, but he cannot have his contract terminated by the 6-year rule. So the isal the daita chialif sacher sacher. If you're gonna make an argument that Rebbe buys the Gezerah Shava Sacher Sacher, amai ka'amar ma misha einu nigel ba'ela. Why does Rebbe have to say that the Ela means relatives? Nalif Sacher Sacher, let him simply do the Gezerah Shava. And therefore he can be redeemed just like A Jewish slave theoretically could be redeemed if he sold himself, okay, from Sacher. So obviously, the Havamina goes, Rebbe doesn't buy the Gezei Reshava, except Rav Memnuni gets argued with by Rav Nachman again. Omer Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak li'aylam yalef sacher. No, Rebbe always held from the Gezei Reshava. He's not the Tana we're looking for. Shani hacha the Omer Kra, but here the pasuk is delimiting. Remember, we can delimit the Gezei Reshava by darshaning a pasuk to limit the Gezei Reshava, because the pasuk says Yigolenu, they should redeem him. Lozeh v'lo la'acher. That you can, this pasuk, in theory, you'd use the Gezei Reshava and say relatives could buy any Jewish indentured servant his freedom. But because it says Ba'ela in this case of the non-Jewish master, but therefore the pasuk delimits it to this specific case. You got the dead people? There you go. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll do the dead people. Year of Learning, friends of Leonie Meiselman, Leah Sabra, Bastanis Lundel, friends of Meliskotsky, Moshe Zelig, Ben Mordechai, Martin Lipman and family in memory of his wife, Malka Chana Bas Pinchas, friends of Herb Jeremiah, Svi Ben Zev, friends of Sam Coleman, Shmuel Ben Yaakov, friends of Gideon Lazinski, Mordechai Shlomo Ben Meir. Bella and David Adler in memory of her father, Eliyahu ben Yosef Cohen. Everybody inspired by Rebbetzin Shapiro, Sarah Esther, Malka, Bas Meshulam Yisachar. Gail and Leslie Kaplan in memory of their parents, Mushka Tzvinza, Bas Yosef Chaim and Chava, Chana ben Moshe Elazar and Chana, Pesha Bas Shmuel Yitzchak Halevi V'Tzipora, and Isser ben Yoel Moshe HaKohen V'Chan. Week of month of learning, Malka and Rabbi Yanki Heinig in memory of her father Yosef ben Yecheskel Yehuda, Marsha Federbush, memory of her husband Uriel Pinchas, Bas Reb Shimon, Gary and Marsha Schrager in memory of his parents Freda Bas Hindel and David ben Yosef. Andrea and David Dolney in memory of her father Tzvi Herschel Hillel ben Avraham, Michael and Judy Peretsky, memory of his father Gershom ben Chaim Tzvi, Melvin and Haran Haller in memory of his father Avram ben Tzvi. Week of Learning, Judah and Michael Klein, memory of Judah's father and Michael's grandfather Chaim ben Chanach, I guess. Judy and Marty Engel in memory of her father, Chaim Yosef ben Alter Yaakov, Judy Ager in memory of Yerachmiel ben Aaron, her son. Today is, what's the date? 28 is Walter and Sippy Freed in memory of his brother, Aryeh Leib ben Avram Meir. And again, Marty's Schwer and Erwin's mother. Okay, so it's almost 9:30. We'll just wrap up a little bit here. So the pasuk says, "Ve'elahu Rebbe Meir, Rebbe Omer, ve'elahu nigo." Only relatives can redeem him, but the 6 years don't. We did that. The Esau the Daitach the Elif Sacher. We said before, if you say the Sacher, he does not. If he did hold the Sacher, Amaika Omer Masha Einer Nigol Be'elev. Why does he drag in that pasuk? Okay, Nelev Sacher. Let him simply say that Jews can redeem other Jews from servitude anytime they want. Okay, so he doesn't agree with that. So therefore, he doesn't buy the Gezei Reshava. Omer Rab Nachman Bar Yitzchak, he says, Li'aylam Yelev Sacher Sacher, we do make the Gezerah Shava, even Rebbe makes the Gezerah Shava, V'shani Hacha, the Omar Kro, because he limits with the Pasuk, Yigolenu, only his brothers can only redeem him, Lozeh, the guy owned by a non-Jew, V'lo La'acher, and not another slave. Okay, I'm sorry we didn't get further, and we'll try and close the gap tomorrow. Shkaya.
I'm leaving today. I want to thank you all for, being.
I mean, I have to give you $1.
No, you don't give me $1. Yeah. But enjoy
Somebody
your-
give him $1. So
And, continue learning, and when I come back, whenever. Okay?
you're welcome to join us again.
Well, isn't there something online or something?
Yeah.
This is online.
I know.
If
What is the access to it?
you go to the shul site,
Show site.
Shul website, there's a link.
There's a link to it.
Yeah.
So it turns on.
Hey, give him $1.
Okay.
Or when
Hey.
I get here.
So wait a minute. Here's $1.
Oh, thank you.
We go
Thank you.
So yeah,
Go
mitzvah.
back to my phone. Where's that? It's in Brooklyn, New York. You ever heard of
Brooklyn.
it? Everybody here was from Brooklyn one time.
Give him back 50 cents. Yes. Are there still Jews in Brooklyn?
Are you kidding?
A lot of Jews. In Flatbush.
There's orange juice, there's tomato juice.
Flatbush, Borough Park, whatever.
I didn't see any juice.
You didn't see any juice in Borough Park?
Oh, juice in Borough Park, yeah.
And there's even juice in Bensonhurst and Crown Heights and Midwood.
Midwest.
Really?
Midwood.
Still?
Midwood, yeah.
Midwood, yeah, Midwood it's halfway between Borough Park and Flatbush. It has the milas of both and the chasron.